Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So there are a few different topics I wanted to address today. The first one is Donald Trump. So as we're all aware, he is the president-elect and is, expected to officially become president on January 20th of 2017. For those of us who have certain situations and circumstances, as well as those of us, who are activists, this certainly presents some very difficult challenges potentially. So I want to I want to address those. One thing I do want to mention, I recall having some conversations last year in 2015 about Donald Trump, and I can't recall even one person that actually believed he would become our president, let alone even get close to it. And I actually had said back in December 2015 that I did believe he was going to become president, even though I hoped I was wrong. The reason that I had this prediction was the way he came to the surface, so to speak. I don't remember exactly when he announced his intention to run. I think it was in the summer of 2015, and he started doing tours then. But anyway, I didn't really pay much attention to him all that much then. But what really thrust him into the spotlight was in November after the Paris attacks, and then again in December after the San Bernardino attacks. He started making these blanket statements against Muslims, wanting to ban all immigration to this country for anyone who's Muslim. He was speaking out against refugees, against immigrants, especially immigrants, south of our border. And what else? And yeah, I mean, he was calling for increased surveillance of masjids, wanting to register us in if you're Muslim, you have to be registered in a database and even carry a special ID card. Stuff very similar to what you would expect, Hitler to say about the Jews. This is really when he got more publicity than ever. Not for saying things nice or wonderful or inclusive or, logical, but for his extremism. And yet that was when people really started pouring out their support for him. So that is why I was initially very concerned, because, if he had said these ridiculous things, these very hurtful and offensive things, and then he had been immediately condemned and to the point where he just wasn't going to be able to get any votes, if that had been the case, then I wouldn't have taken him as seriously. But that's not really what happened. A lot of people did oppose him, but he continued to gain supporters. So, this didn't really surprise me, though, because, there's a lot of issues that exist in our society that are really being swept to the surface. Some of them have been right in front of us the whole time, but not always talked about. But really what happened was, people that were kind of keeping their own racism and bigotry to themselves, they really kind of started to come out of the woodwork. And so, this was a problem too. And again, just looking at the history, of this country, I mean, this is nothing new, right? I mean, look what happened to indigenous people. Indigenous people in America were slaughtered for their land and resources. Africans were forcibly removed from Africa and brought on slave ships to help build the capitalist empire that we now have. And some of us don't want. And then again, you look at Japanese internment camps and you know, things like that. And it's just, this really isn't anything new. Another thing too is, as I kind of saw things move along, especially earlier this year, I had actually predicted, if it ended up being Sanders versus Trump, then I had thought that Sanders would win. But if it was going to be Clinton versus Trump, then Trump would win. And, of course, Clinton tried her dirty tactics, including here in Arizona, to push Bernie Sanders out. And so sure enough, now we have Donald Trump. I'm Muslim, and, I embraced Islam close to 4 years ago. And I'm also transgender, and, I transitioned 6 years ago. And on top of that, I'm a pretty public activist. I just don't believe in being silent on injustices or wrongs in society or by, our rulers that are supposed to be serving us. So I'm going to talk about those aspects of my identity a little bit and what I think we need to do to move forward. As a transgender woman, I have great concerns, and less so much about Donald Trump, actually, than his Vice President-elect Mike Pence, because he has a history of, recently, he's been saying things that really just aren't supportive of the LGBT community at all. Supporting bans on trans, and it's usually trans women, from using, the bathrooms that correspond to our gender. Things like that. I have no reason to trust either of them. I don't think that other transgender people should really trust, these new political leaders. Many trans people are concerned about having restricted access to hormones or potentially even no access. Same with other medical treatments as well as our documentation, like our state IDs, passport, that type of thing. And I think this is a valid concern. I don't think we should be panicking, but we shouldn't be complacent. I think there's real concerns for a lot of people because, a lot of people just don't have access to health care. Or if they do, they really are barely able to afford it. And, with this new administration, it could become much more difficult. My recommendation, which is what I've heard from other people, if you don't have your documents changed, I would do that sooner rather than later. I would try to get health care if you don't. Get a doctor you're happy with. If you don't, get whatever you need now, because it's easier to deal with these things now than potentially 6 months from now. So, definitely I would do that. Now, another issue, of course, involves, Trump's hostilities towards Muslims, which definitely affects me. I don't know if he's going to follow through with what he says or not, but I tend to be very skeptical of authority in general. In my experience, if someone in charge of anything, I don't care if it's a manager, a religious leader, or a government official, if somebody is making a campaign telling you all the things they're gonna do, if those things are really, really, really good things, chances are what they're saying isn't true. It's not going to happen. They're just making empty promises to get votes or community support or whatever. But if they're saying they're going to do things that are really, really bad, I would take it very seriously. And so I would take these threats against our community very, very seriously. I've been seeing on the internet from time to time many Muslims, joking around about, registries and all this stuff. You know, people joked around, you know, on the Titanic after it had hit, you know, the iceberg, thinking, oh, well, you know, everything's fine, right? Well, there was a certain point where they quit laughing when they realized it wasn't fine. So let's not, you know, let's not be complacent about this. I've met so many people that they're just shocked that this could happen. There's like, no way. A lot of people just didn't really think it was going to happen, and it did. And I'm seeing lots of comments over, you know, since early November. I'm hearing and seeing comments from a number of Muslims where, you know, they just don't understand how this could happen, and they're really disturbed at this this rise of the alt-right, if you will. In my opinion, the phrase alt-right is really just, you know, Nazism rebranded. You know, they're coming up with a new term to make it sound, you know, nicer. But yeah, it's the same thing. You know, these people, they're about the white race, and white supremacy, you know, and some other things, and it's not good. People kept saying, well, how can this happen? How can this happen? You know, we're all such nice people. You know, most of us aren't terrorists, and most of us, you know, are good to our neighbors and our coworkers and so forth. And then it's kind of like, it seems like people kind of turned on us, you know, people heard all these things that he said, and yet they voted for him anyway. Well, we need to look at our own Islamic history. We don't have to look farther than our Quran, actually. Allah has told us as Muslims that we will be tested. And, you know, we can see how, you know, examples of how the Sahaba were tested. They went through trials way worse than what we're experiencing. You know, and even in later history, but still a long time ago, I mean, there's been so many tyrannical, you know, and fascist and brutal dictators and other rulers that Muslims have had to deal with. So, you know, we act all surprised, some of us, but, you know, Allah said we're going to be tested, and I believe that's what's happening. Those of us acting like this is all new, it's really not. You know, there's been countless Muslims who are innocent of any wrongdoing, who have been imprisoned, tortured, and even killed by the U.S. government. You know, we have innocent Muslims in Guantanamo, and, you know, Obama promised to close it. He never did. Obama promised to get rid of the Patriot Act. He ended up expanding it. I mean, the surveillance actually was worse under Obama than under Bush. So again, you know, this is, and the wars continue. You know, the wars have just gotten worse and worse and worse. So we need to look at kind of the, you know, the longer view of history and the bigger picture, because it may seem intellectually simple to just pin all of the problems our community is facing on one man, but that's not how it works. It's not just one man. And I can use an example from Nazi Germany. It actually wasn't just Hitler. I mean, it was a lot of people, actually, but Hitler was the leader. And so, you know, we have to consider these things. We should be grateful to Allah, you know, that we are being tested, that we are being challenged. You know, that doesn't mean we're happy with bad things that happen to us. But these things do test our faith. And, you know, being Muslim, especially if you're a very visible Muslim, you know, you dress Islamically or you know, or so forth, you know, there's a risk. I mean, again, people have been killed, you know, just for being Muslim. And this has happened all throughout history. Again, it's not like it's this new thing. So, you know, if we're to take our deen seriously, we have to, it doesn't mean we're going to be perfect Muslims, none of us are, but we have to be willing to stand up for ourselves. We have to be willing to take these risks. Allah has promised He will provide for us. I mean, you know, He won't give a soul a burden more than it can bear. It may seem awfully unbearable, but he will get us through it one way or another. And, you know, if we go through these tests, well, then inshallah we can get rewarded for them on Judgment Day. So it's kind of shocking to me to see people just immediately want to, you know, cast off this aspect of Islam or cast off that aspect because of, you know, because of fear of a possibility of being attacked. Why live a lie, right? You know, I mean, if we take this deen seriously, then really Islam should be everything to us. You know, it's worth the hardships. It's worth it. Even though none of us want to deal with horrible things, it's not worth giving up the religion. So that's, you know, one thing I wanted to say. You know, I'm also an activist, and this is something I kind of want to spend some time on. We need to stand up. We need to use our tongues and speak haqq, or the truth. We need to, when there's something wrong, if you see something wrong, or there's something if there's something unjust, say something. If there's someone that's being hurt, and you can help them, then do something. We have got to be a community, and this is not just for Muslims. You know, one of the things that I've found as an activist is I don't compartmentalize myself. I don't put myself in a box. I don't just focus on trans issues. I don't just focus on, you know, Islamic issues. You know, any community that is undergoing a struggle and you know, that I feel strongly about, you know, the Dakota Access Pipeline, you know, is you know, horribly impacts the indigenous community. You know, so many unarmed black people, you know, being shot and killed by the police when they weren't doing anything wrong, or, you know, or at least they weren't posing any threat. I mean, you don't kill somebody for stealing cigarettes or whatever, right? You know, and that's the Black Lives Matter, you know, movement. So I found that, you know, we really need to step out of the boxes, because the struggles really are all pretty related. You know, the Latinx community, that really is trying to get immigration reform, is, you know, that's one thing as well. And why are these struggles all related? Because, you know, they're a symptom of capitalism, colonialism, and imperialism. And this has actually gone on for, you know, centuries, not just in this country, but, you know, in many places around the world. I mean, this is nothing new. It's been going on for a very long time. And, you know, it's not going away anytime soon. So we as activists really need to start, you know, being there for other people. We need to support each other. I don't care if it's your neighbor, your coworker, you know, anybody. We need to be there for each other. And, you know, branch out. Be yourself, basically, but also make yourself known. And what I mean by that is, one of the ways to combat ignorance is when people have personal experiences. There are many people who have never met a Muslim. There are people who have never met a transgender person. Those people, of course, are going to get their ideas about Muslims and transgender people from the media, which, you know, are almost always going to be very, very negative and not informative at all. Now, anybody that knows me personally, okay, they now know both a Muslim and a trans person. The point is, when, you know, when people get to know people, then they get a much more, they're much more informed than, again, if they just hear, if you just hear something about somebody or a group of people from the media, or even from school, you know, I mean, colleges and so forth have classes, you know, and things. You know, what's on the news or in a textbook is not going to be the same as your experience of direct learning from another person. And, you know, it doesn't mean, okay, that everybody that knows Muslims or trans people, for that matter, you know, are going to like us, or even, you know, they may still be prejudiced in different ways. But I think that it really, in the long run and overall, it makes a difference. Isolation really doesn't benefit any of our communities at all. We need to make ourselves known to other people and get to know each other as well. We need to get to know each other. You know, we need to be enlightened about each other's differences. We need to learn about each other. And that's how you really help combat hatred and bigotry, is with education. And again, having those personal relationships and direct experiences. Please do upset the status quo. Please do upset the apple cart. Please do rock the boat. Because that's what's really needed. You know, and so going forward, I mean, we'll see how the year 2017 goes under Trump. But, you know, we all need to be very, very aware of what's going on around us, in our communities, in our country, in our world. And we really, really, really need to be there for each other. Division is what the ruling class wants. We are so much more powerful as people when we're united than when we're divided. So that is really what I think we should focus on. So anyway, you know, these are my points. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.